Hi everyone, my name is Kennedy Douglas. I'm from West Texas A&M University, and today I'm going to be talking about capital punishment in Texas, innocence, and justice. So to get us started, I wanted to talk about what interested me in doing this study. Primarily as my career aspirations. I want to go to law school to be a criminal defense lawyer, and so I wanted to learn more about it. And working in a law firm right now, I get to see a lot of flaws in the justice system, so I wanted to study it more and also focus on the minority treatment in our court system, as well as defendants waiving their Miranda rights. Around 80% of people waive their Miranda rights right from the start, which is almost a setup to fail right from the beginning. And so I thought more people needed to be aware of this. And then also the legacy of Ron McNair. It has encouraged me in so many ways to reach for my maximum potential and to never give up on my dreams no matter what and no matter what people tell me. So what is the death penalty? The death penalty is when a person is put to death by the state as a punishment for a crime that they committed. Each state legislature gets to decide which crimes are going to be punishable by death, and so it varies among every state. But today we're going to talk about Texas. Texas Penal Code Chapter 19, Title 5 gives you every possibility to get the death penalty, but usually it is a capital crime, which is two felonies kind of tied together. There's several different things that it could be, but for example, a murder and a rape, something like that. So Texas resumed its execution processes in 1982 after an 18-year-long period to try to find a new method. They decided that the smell of charred flesh by the electric chair was inhumane. It was barbaric. And so they came up with lethal injection. Now, talking about lethal injection, the cost per person, per execution, is $1.2 million. As far as life in prison, it's about $47.50 per person per day, and that adds up to be around $693,500 for life imprisonment per person. So the cost is pretty extreme. I'll let you form your own opinion about that. Now, they use pentobarbital, which is the same drug used to euthanize animals, and so that's what we're euthanizing prisoners with. So it sends the person into respiratory arrest, and it pretty much just stops the flow of oxygen to the brain. There are several flaws that come with lethal injection as well that are currently being looked at, researched. There's a lot of injections that are expired. They use expired serums, and it's getting harder and harder to get these chemicals, and so they're trying to make them last as long as they can, and sometimes they're expired by the time they use them. And it sometimes causes a delay in the process, and it causes unnecessary agony for the prisoner, which is cruel and unusual punishment. So there are approximately 2,700 prisoners currently on death row in the United States. Texas has 219 inmates, 73% of those are minorities, and we've only had 13 exonerations ever. So as far as my research methodology, I did a qualitative study, which means I use more words than numbers, but I used a lot of literature. I dug really deep. I had interviews, books, everything. And so I looked at 4 case studies. I looked at Anthony Grace, which is this man right here, Johnny Frank Garrett, Gary Graham, and Carlos De Luna. And then I developed justice charts for each case, and I made these charts that had columns that said yes, no, maybe, and then each event that happened in their case I identified as it being just or unjust, or maybe it was kind of in between. Some things were just, some things weren't. And if you would like a copy of that, comment below and I'll send one to you. So some factors I looked at in death penalty sentencing, I found that race and media played a big part. They often distort the truth, they mix up the stories, they don't have their facts straight, and it potentially ends up poisoning the jury pool for those defendants. And so we see a lot more coverage over Black perpetrators on white victims and less of any other crime. There are many other races that are committing the same crimes, but we see more of Black perpetrators and white victims. As far as gender, we see 80% of white female victims and only 20% of other races. Why? I don't know. So, as far as representation, these defendants are often given court-appointed attorneys, minorities are, and so no matter what, those court-appointed attorneys are paid a flat fee. Whether they show up and they're there for their client and they're helping them and they're doing everything they can and working on that case, or whether they just show up to court and meet their client for the first time, shake their hand, go into the court, and really didn't prepare at all. They get paid the same. So oftentimes we see a lot of the lack of work, and we see them working for the state more than they're working for their client. As far as geography, Harris County plays a vital role in a lot of these cases that I looked at, but 91% of these cases took place in the South and 41% in Texas alone. So we often see large African American populations being targeted, and socioeconomic status often tends to play a huge role. They come from the same neighborhoods, they come from the same schools, things like that. As far as misconduct, we see a lot of police in gross prosecutorial misconduct. They are set out to win and not necessarily set out to find justice. And they find a theory and they do whatever they can to prove that theory, no matter whether it's true or not. They are going to prove their theory. And so it's kind of disappointing to know that sometimes they're not set out for finding the right person, but set out to closing the case to make the community feel safe. And that's not justice when the true criminal is still out there. So the statement of the problem. Approximately 2,700 prisoners currently on death row in the United States, like I said before, and a person sentenced to death in Texas is 3 times more likely to be executed than someone sentenced to death in the rest of the country. Texas has 219 inmates, 73% minorities, and then to break it down, we have 94 African Americans, 56 Latinx, and 6 other races. And so you can kind of see and visualize through those numbers kind of the targets. And this isn't because they're actually out committing more crimes than any other race. It's because they're more targeted, they're more vulnerable, they're easier to scapegoat, things like that. And so when you dig more into the research and more into literature, you kind of see a lot more, and it's more understanding of kind of what's actually going on than what the media tells us. And it leaves us questioning whether or not Texas is executing the morally corrupt or the most vulnerable individuals. And it also makes us ask, is Texas criminal justice system mistaking the innocent for the guilty and the guilty for the innocent? So here's a little diagram showing executions by state. If you look, you can see that in 2018, Texas alone had 13 of the 25 executions, and in 2019, they had 9 of the 22. They are executing more prisoners than all the other states combined, and they may keep the pace in 2020 as we already have approximately 12 and maybe more since the last time I checked it, people already set to be executed this year, and we've actually already executed 2. And so we're on track. So Anthony Graves is who I'm primarily going to focus on today. He was the 138th exonerated death row inmate in America. He spent 18 and a half years in prison, 16 of those in solitary confinement, 12 on Texas death row, with 2 execution dates for a crime he didn't commit. And the woman in the picture with him is Nicole Cazares. She is a former lawyer, and now she's a professor of undergraduates. And she was teaching a class, and they were digging into cases, looking at them, and they actually helped prove his innocence. And so I think it's really cool as an undergraduate to know that 5 or 6 students really had an impact in his freedom. So this is a video about Anthony Graves and his journey, what all he had to endure, what he had to go through. It's called My Last Day. It's on YouTube, and won't let me play it because of the recording, but you should definitely check it out. It's very heart-touching, and it tells a lot about his story and what he had to see while he was there. So Anthony Graves was accused of the murder of the Davis family in 1992. Each victim was stabbed, strangled, and then their house was set on fire. And during the interrogations, they were just hounding and hounding and hounding Robert Carter after they brought him in because he showed up to the funeral with bandages all over him, all over his body, and it kind of got the Texas Rangers' attention. He was the father of 5-year-old Jason, this young boy right here, and they believed that he was in trouble with child support. He didn't want to pay child support, and so he thought that murdering Jason and the family would be easier, I guess. And so Robert Carter was being interrogated, and they told him there was no way he did this on his own, and they weren't going to let him go until he gave the name of his accomplice. And so he is married to Anthony Graves' cousin, and he had seen him in passing that morning, and that's the only person he could think of, and so he pinned it on him. He later confessed, but with police misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, there was a lot going on, and they would not take his confession that he did it all by himself until later on when it was brought back up. And so he did end up confessing on the table again in front of all these people, and so it helped Anthony Graves in the long run, but it took a lot to get to that point. So who's Anthony Graves now? What is he doing now after he's been exonerated? He used his compensation to start his own foundation, and he actually had a fight for his compensation, and he used Jeff Blackburn, the lawyer that I actually work for right now. So I got to talk to him a lot about it and kind of see what was going on. But he did end up winning $1.5 million. The state of Texas has actually never formally apologized or owned up to the wrong incarceration of him, which is, it's really disappointing. But he did use his money to start his foundation that is committed to bringing about true justice reform across the nation, not just in Texas. And then they also help with reentry in place of healthcare, mentorship, community outreach, and legal assistance for those that were incarcerated but are getting out. And then he wrote his own book, Infinite Hope, and he talks about how the wrongful conviction, solitary confinement, 12 years on death row, how he survived it and how it felt to kill his soul and his sanity. And he goes into great detail about his whole case, everything he had to endure, what they put him through. And it's a really good book. I definitely recommend it if you're interested in this kind of stuff and if you want to learn more about him. And then he was once seen as a danger to society, and that's why he was given the death penalty. And so it's just amazing to me how much he has just proven that he wasn't a danger to society. He never was, and how much of an impact he's making now. And it's amazing. So a brief explanation of the findings. There was an abundant amount of misconduct, racial discrimination, and brutality that took place and still take place today. The worst problem with executions is that the truth can so easily die with the executed prisoner, and the public has no recourse to freedom of informality on laws or the courts to obtain forensic testing. Instead, the legislatures, judges, and prosecutors refuse to allow forensic testing that could prove innocence of those that have been executed. In fact, they're actually encouraged to get rid of all of the evidence and completely close the case. That way, nothing can come back. And this powerfully discredits their own repeated assurances that those men and women were executed beyond a reasonable doubt. Fix it. Some ideas are videotaping interrogations to establish the credibility of the confessions that take place, to establish a commission to review wrongful convictions specifically, and to go into all the details about them, and then strengthen our clemency process by requiring the Board of Pardons and Paroles to conduct public hearings on requests for the commuted sentences. They need to hear from the community and allow new evidence to be presented. Oftentimes, past a certain point, you can't present any new evidence, no matter if it proves their innocence or not. And to me, like, why? Like, if you have evidence that proves their innocence, why can it not be used in court after a certain period of time? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And also, proper representation, enforcing lawyers, appointed court attorneys to actually do their jobs and to make sure that they're doing their jobs, and not hiring these attorneys that are on the list that literally don't even specialize in certain crimes that they have to go and defend. Doesn't make sense. And then to make it illegal to lie during an interrogation. In Canada, it's illegal to lie during an interrogation, to make stuff up, and to be that intimidating. And I think it should be illegal here too. You're looking for the truth. You're not looking for just a person to blame it on. And so by lying to them and leading them to making a confession that could possibly be false is incredible. And so I don't think that we should be able to do that. So a lot of people talk about getting justice for the victims. And 175 victims' family members actually wrote a letter to President Trump and Attorney General Barr, and they talked about how the death penalty does not prevent violence, it does not solve crime, it does not provide services for families like theirs, it does not help solve the over 250,000 homicide cold cases in the United States. It exasperates the trauma of losing a loved one and creates yet another grieving family. It also wastes many millions of dollars that could be better invested in programs that actually reduce crime and violence and that address the needs of families like theirs. So in conclusion, not all men are innocent, but not all men deserve to die either, especially those that are innocent and that didn't commit the crime. We need to find the true criminals. We need to find the people that are actually doing these crimes. And we do. I'm not saying every single person that's executed was innocent, but just one false execution should be enough to anger us and to make us see what's going on and see that the system we have is broken and we need to find a way to fix it. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment below or to send me an email, send me a message. I'd be happy to talk about this even more. And so I'm sorry it's virtual and you can't ask questions face to face, but I'd love to hear your questions and discuss this further. Thank you guys so much.